Time does not pass in prison the way it does on the outside. In the free world, time belongs to you. You decide when you wake up, when you eat, when you rest, when you speak, and when you are silent. Even when life is hard, the clock still feels like something you control, or at least something you can ignore. Inside prison, time becomes a weapon. From the first morning count to the last lights out command, every minute of an inmate's day is measured, scheduled, restricted, and enforced. Nothing is accidental. Nothing is flexible. Nothing belongs to the person living it. Food is not served when you're hungry. Sleep is not allowed when you're tired. Showers are not taken when you feel dirty. Silence is not optional, it is imposed. And over time, that control changes the way the human mind works. This documentary is not about riots, escapes, or famous criminals. It is about something quieter, something far more powerful, something that happens every single day in prisons across America and around the world. A system of timing that slowly strips inmates of autonomy, identity, and resistance without ever leaving a visible mark. Most people think prison punishment is about bars, walls, and locked doors. But those are only the surface. The real punishment happens in routines, in schedules, in waiting, in being told when to stand, when to sit, when to eat, when to sleep, and when to say nothing at all. Ask former inmates what broke them the most, and many will not say violence. They won't say isolation cells or physical force. They will talk about time, about how days feel endless but meaningless, about how weeks blur together, about how the constant scheduling removes any sense of control over their own bodies. In prison, you don't wake up when your body is ready. You wake up when the system decides it's time, often before sunrise, sometimes multiple times a night. Lights flick on, doors slam, guards shout counts. Sleep becomes shallow, fragmented, and never fully restful. Meals are not moments of nourishment. They are timed events designed for speed, compliance, and control. You eat when told. You stop when told. If you're late, you don't eat. If the unit is locked down, meals come cold, or not at all. Hunger becomes normal. Complaining becomes dangerous. Showers, something so basic on the outside, become privileges. You may get a few minutes. You may get a schedule. You may lose them entirely for rule violations that have nothing to do with hygiene. The feeling of being clean becomes something you wait for, not something you choose. And then there is silence. Not the peaceful kind, the enforced kind. In many prisons, silence is not just expected, it is required. Talking during count can lead to punishment. Speaking at the wrong time can get your entire unit locked down. Silence becomes survival. You learn when to disappear, when not to ask questions, when to lower your voice, when to stop reacting altogether. This is how control works without chains. Every routine sends a message. You do not own your time. You do not own your body. You do not own your voice. And when time is taken from you long enough, something changes. People stop planning. Stop imagining the future. Stop thinking in days or weeks. Life shrinks into meal times, count times, movement times. Existence becomes a series of commands followed by waiting. Psychologists call this institutionalization. Inmates call it survival. Because once your internal clock is replaced by the prison schedule, resistance becomes exhausting. You stop fighting the system because fighting time itself feels impossible. And that is exactly the point. This documentary will take you inside that system. We will break down how prisons use food schedules to enforce obedience, how sleep disruption weakens mental stability, how restricted hygiene impacts dignity and self-worth, and how forced silence reshapes behavior and identity. You will hear how these routines are designed, why they exist, and what they do to the human mind over months, years, and decades. You will understand why some inmates struggle to function when they are finally released, not because they forgot how to live, but because their sense of time was stolen. This is not about sympathy. This is not about excuses. This is about reality. Because once you understand how time is used inside prison, you realize the bars are only part of the sentence. The schedule is the rest. And once time controls you, everything else follows. Before we begin, tap like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us uncover the darkest corners of the prison system. Now let's step inside. Prison schedules are not accidental. They are not the result of convenience, tradition, or efficiency alone. Every movement, every pause, every interruption is designed with intention. Long before an inmate ever steps inside a cell, Their day has already been mapped out, minute by minute, by administrators, policymakers, and security planners whose primary goal is not comfort, growth, or rehabilitation. It is control. From the moment someone enters the correctional system, time stops belonging to them. The clock they followed on the outside, the one tied to personal needs, family routines, or natural rhythms, becomes irrelevant. In its place comes institutional time, a rigid framework built around compliance, predictability, and power. Correctional facilities rely on schedules for one core reason. People are easier to manage when they are predictable. Predictability reduces risk. Risk reduction lowers staffing strain. And lower strain keeps institutions running without disruption. Rehabilitation, when it exists, comes later, if at all. This is why prison schedules are uniform, repetitive, and intentionally inflexible. Wake-up times are fixed, regardless of age, health, or sleep quality. Lights come on when the institution says so, not when the body is ready. In many facilities, this happens before sunrise. In some, inmates are woken multiple times throughout the night for counts. Head checks designed to ensure no one has escaped, died, or moved without permission. Sleep, one of the most basic human needs, becomes fragmented by design. From an administrative perspective, this disruption serves multiple purposes. It ensures accountability. It reinforces authority. And it prevents inmates from fully settling into deep, restorative rest. A tired population is slower, less reactive, and less likely to organize or resist. Fatigue dulls aggression, but it also dulls hope. Meals follow the same philosophy. Food in prison is not scheduled around hunger. It is scheduled around staffing shifts, security windows, and movement control. Breakfast may come early in the morning, hours before most people would naturally eat. Dinner may be served in the afternoon, leaving a long stretch of hunger through the night. The timing is deliberate. Large groups moving through a facility create risk, so meals are rushed, staggered, or shortened. Inmates learn quickly that eating fast is safer than eating fully. Those who fall behind may miss meals altogether. Complaints are not encouraged. Asking for more food is often interpreted as defiance. Over time, hunger becomes background noise. This normalization of deprivation is not incidental. It reinforces the idea that needs are privileges, not rights. And when basic needs are controlled, behavior follows. Movement throughout the day is equally regulated. Inmates do not walk freely from place to place. Every transition, cell to chow hall, unit to yard, housing to work detail, happens during tightly controlled windows. Miss that window, and the opportunity disappears. If a door closes, it stays closed. This rigidity teaches one lesson repeatedly. Timing matters more than intention. It does not matter if you are ready, willing, or trying to comply. If you are late, you lose access. Over time, this creates a mindset where people stop acting independently and start waiting for permission. Waiting becomes the dominant activity. Showers, phone calls, recreation, even medical care operate on schedules that prioritize order over well-being. Hygiene is reduced to time slots. Privacy is sacrificed for efficiency. Human dignity is filtered through availability. And then there is silence. Silence is not written into most rulebooks explicitly, but it is enforced culturally and structurally. Talking during count can result in discipline. Speaking during certain movements can cause entire units to lose privileges. Noise becomes collective punishment. This creates peer-enforced silence. Inmates learn to self-police. One person speaking out of turn can cost everyone yard time, commissary access, or recreation. Over time, silence stops feeling imposed by staff and starts being enforced by fellow inmates trying to avoid consequences. This is one of the most effective control mechanisms in the prison system. When people police each other, authority no longer has to. From the outside, these schedules are often justified as necessary for safety, and in many ways, they are. Prisons are large, complex environments filled with people who may pose risks to themselves or others. Order matters. Structure matters. But there is a difference between structure and domination. Rehabilitation requires flexibility. It requires individual assessment. It requires recognizing that people have different needs, rhythms, and capacities. Schedules designed solely around control leave little room for growth. And that is why rehabilitation is often discussed, but rarely felt. When every day looks exactly the same, motivation fades. When time is no longer connected to personal goals, ambition disappears. Inmates stop thinking in weeks or months and start thinking in counts and meals. Morning count. Chow. Work call. Count. Chow. Lockdown. Days collapse into routines so repetitive they erase memory. Ask long-term inmates what they did on a specific day years ago, and most cannot answer. Not because they don't remember, but because nothing distinguished one day from another. This is the hidden cost of institutional time. It keeps facilities stable, but it hollows out the people inside them. And once a person adapts fully to that system, once their internal clock is replaced by the institution's schedule, it becomes incredibly difficult to reverse. Many released inmates struggle not because they forgot how to live freely, but because freedom no longer feels natural. Choice becomes overwhelming. In the next chapter, we will go deeper into one of the most powerful tools in this system, food timing, and how controlling when and how inmates eat reshapes behavior, health, and survival behind bars. Food is never just food in prison. On the outside, meals are personal. You eat when you're hungry, skip meals when you're busy, snack when you feel like it, and adjust your diet based on health, culture, or preference. Food is tied to comfort, memory, and choice. Inside prison, food becomes something else entirely. It becomes a schedule, a privilege, a control mechanism. The first lesson inmates learn about food is simple. Hunger does not matter. Meals are served when the institution decides, not when bodies need fuel. Breakfast often arrives before dawn, sometimes as early as 4 or 5 in the morning. Lunch may come late morning. Dinner is frequently served in the mid-afternoon, leaving a long stretch, sometimes 12 hours or more, before the next meal. This gap is not accidental. Administrators understand that spreading meals unevenly keeps inmates focused on the next scheduled event. Hunger creates anticipation. Anticipation creates compliance. When people are hungry, they are more likely to follow rules, avoid confrontation, and prioritize survival over resistance. Over time, hunger becomes part of daily life. Portion sizes reinforce this reality. Prison meals are designed to meet minimum nutritional standards on paper, but those standards often rely on processed, calorie-dense foods rather than fresh, filling meals. Protein is limited. Fresh fruits and vegetables are inconsistent. Meals are repetitive, bland, and rushed. Eating becomes a race. In many facilities, inmates have only a few minutes to finish their food before being ordered to stand up and move. Those who eat slowly risk losing half their tray. Those who hesitate miss meals entirely. There is no room for enjoyment. There is no room for conversation. Food is consumed quickly, quietly, and without ceremony. This environment reshapes behavior. Inmates learn to eat fast, even when they're not hungry. They hoard food when possible. They trade items. They save scraps. Hunger teaches efficiency, not health. And when meals are missed, due to lockdowns, staffing shortages, or disciplinary measures, the message becomes clear. Food is conditional. Lockdowns are especially revealing. When a unit is locked down, meals are often delivered cold to cells. Portions may be smaller. Variety disappears. Sometimes meals are delayed for hours. Sometimes they are skipped entirely. Complaints are rarely addressed. Hunger is framed as an acceptable consequence of disorder. This turns collective punishment into a daily reality. One person's actions can affect hundreds. If someone violates a rule, the entire unit may lose hot meals or access to the chow hall. This creates internal pressure. Inmates begin enforcing behavior among themselves, not out of loyalty to the system, but out of fear of hunger. Food becomes leverage. Beyond timing and portions, food access is deeply tied to privilege. Good behavior earns better access to commissary, where inmates can supplement meals with snacks, instant noodles, canned meat, or sweets. Those with money, either from prison jobs or outside support, can partially escape institutional hunger. Those without money cannot. This creates a clear hierarchy. Hunger is not distributed evenly. It follows lines of class, support, and status. Inmates with no family contact or financial backing experience food deprivation more intensely and more consistently. The system does not hide this disparity. It relies on it. Commissary becomes a pressure valve. It allows institutions to maintain minimal meal standards while shifting responsibility onto inmates. If you're hungry, buy food. If you can't afford food, work. If work is unavailable, endure. Nutrition takes a back seat to compliance. Over time, constant hunger changes the way people think. Studies on food deprivation show increased irritability, reduced concentration, emotional numbness, and heightened anxiety. In prison, these effects are compounded by stress, lack of privacy, and sleep disruption. Small problems feel overwhelming. Minor conflicts escalate quickly. Mental health deteriorates quietly. Yet from the system's perspective, this instability is manageable as long as it doesn't erupt into open violence. Hunger that weakens is preferable to fullness that empowers. There is also a psychological layer to prison food that rarely gets discussed: humiliation. Meals are served on trays designed for efficiency, not dignity. Food items touch each other. Portions are measured with scoops, not care. Special diets are limited. Requests are discouraged. Eating becomes a reminder of dependence. Every meal reinforces a single truth: you are being provided for, not choosing. This dependence reshapes identity. Inmates stop thinking about food as nourishment and start thinking about it as currency. What can be traded? What can be saved? What can be stolen? What can be lost? In some facilities, food becomes a source of conflict and violence, not because people are greedy, but because hunger narrows focus. When basic needs are uncertain, everything else fades. This is why food timing is such a powerful tool. It doesn't require force. It doesn't leave bruises. It doesn't trigger public outrage. It works quietly, consistently, and legally. Former inmates often say the same thing. They didn't realize how hungry they were until they left. The body adapts. The mind adjusts. Hunger becomes normal. And that normalization is the most dangerous part. Because when deprivation becomes routine, people stop expecting better. They stop demanding dignity. They stop imagining alternatives. Survival replaces aspiration. Food control doesn't just shape behavior, it reshapes expectations. In the next chapter, we will look at another fundamental human need manipulated by the prison schedule: sleep, and how constant interruption, early wake-ups, and nighttime counts weaken mental stability over time. Sleep is one of the first things prison takes away. Not officially, not on paper, not in a rulebook, but in practice, sleep inside prison is never fully yours. On the outside, sleep is private. You choose when to lie down, when to turn off the lights, when to rest your body and mind. Even when sleep is difficult, it is still something you pursue on your own terms. Inside prison, sleep is conditional. It is allowed, interrupted, shortened, and monitored according to institutional needs, not human ones. Over time, this constant disruption reshapes the brain, dulls emotional response, and weakens resistance in ways that are subtle but profound. Most people imagine prison nights as quiet and still. Locked doors, dim lights, silence. The reality is very different. Prisons never fully sleep. They operate on a 24-hour cycle of surveillance, accountability, and control. Guards rotate shifts. Counts must be conducted. Movement must be tracked. And inmates are required to be present, visible, and responsive, no matter the hour. Nighttime counts are a perfect example. In many facilities, inmates are woken multiple times each night so officers can visually confirm their presence. Lights flip on. Doors rattle. Flashlights sweep across faces. Voices call out numbers or names. Sometimes inmates must stand. Sometimes they must respond verbally. Then the lights go off again. And just as the body begins to drift back into rest, it happens all over again. This fragmentation prevents deep sleep. Deep sleep, the stage where the brain repairs itself, processes emotion, and restores cognitive function, is especially sensitive to interruption. When sleep is broken into short, shallow segments, the body never fully recovers. In prison, this becomes the norm. Early morning wake-ups compound the problem. Many facilities begin morning count before sunrise. Lights come on regardless of how little sleep an inmate has had. There is no option to sleep in. There is no recovery day. Fatigue accumulates without relief. Week after week, month after month, year after year. From a control standpoint, exhaustion is useful. Tired people are slower to react. They are less likely to challenge authority. They have reduced impulse control and diminished capacity for long-term planning. Fatigue narrows focus to immediate survival. Getting through the day, getting to the next meal, getting back to the cell. Sleep deprivation also heightens emotional volatility. Small frustrations feel overwhelming. Minor conflicts escalate faster. Anxiety increases. Depression deepens. But because everyone around you is experiencing the same exhaustion, these changes feel normal, expected, even. The system does not need to label this as punishment. It is simply how things are. Noise plays a major role as well. Prisons are loud environments, even at night. Doors slam. Radios crackle. Officers talk. Inmates shout down tears. Toilets flush. Ventilation systems hum. Someone is always awake somewhere nearby. Silence is rare. True quiet almost never exists. For inmates housed in dorm-style units or overcrowded facilities, sleep becomes even more elusive. Dozens of bodies share the same space. One person's insomnia becomes everyone's problem. There is no way to escape it. And yet, exhaustion is never treated as a legitimate issue. Complaints about sleep are dismissed. Fatigue is framed as personal weakness. Requests for accommodations are rarely granted. The system does not acknowledge broken sleep as harm. It treats it as an acceptable side effect of incarceration. Over time, the brain adapts. Inmates learn to function in a constant state of low-level exhaustion. Memory becomes unreliable. Concentration fades. Emotions flatten. Many describe feeling detached from themselves, as if they are watching life happen rather than participating in it. This detachment is not accidental. When people are well-rested, they reflect. They plan. They imagine alternatives. When they are exhausted, they endure. Sleep deprivation also affects perception of time. Days blur together. Nights feel endless. Without restorative rest, there are no mental landmarks, no sense of progression. Life becomes a continuous loop of fatigue and compliance. This is where institutional time and biological time collide. The body wants rest. The institution wants accountability. The institution always wins. For inmates in higher security units, the effects are even more severe. Lights may remain on 24 hours a day. Cells are checked constantly. Movement is limited. The body never fully relaxes because surveillance never stops. Even when an inmate lies still, sleep remains shallow. Psychologically, this creates a state of permanent alertness. The nervous system stays activated. Stress hormones remain elevated. Over time, this contributes to long-term mental health issues, anxiety disorders, depression, emotional numbness, and in some cases, hallucinations. Yet because sleep deprivation leaves no visible scars, it remains largely invisible to the public. There are no bruises to photograph, no dramatic footage to circulate, no single incident to outrage over. Instead, there is erosion. Erosion of patience, erosion of identity, erosion of self-control. Former inmates often say that sleep was one of the hardest things to regain after release. Freedom did not immediately bring rest. The body had forgotten how to sleep without interruption. Silence felt unfamiliar. Darkness felt unsafe. The damage lingered. Sleep deprivation in prison does not exist to rehabilitate. It exists to stabilize the institution. And stability, in this context, means predictability, compliance, and reduced resistance. Exhausted people rarely organize. Exhausted people rarely revolt. Exhausted people survive quietly. In the next chapter, we will examine another basic human function shaped by prison schedules, hygiene, and how controlling showers, cleanliness, and privacy affects dignity, self-worth, and mental health behind bars. Cleanliness is one of the first markers of dignity. On the outside, hygiene is private, personal, and largely invisible. You shower when you feel dirty. You wash your clothes when they smell. You use the bathroom without permission. These actions are so ordinary they rarely register as privileges. Inside prison, hygiene becomes controlled. Not because cleanliness doesn't matter, but because controlling it sends a powerful message. Even your body is not fully yours. Showers are one of the clearest examples. In most prisons, inmates do not shower when they want. They shower when they are told. Access is restricted to specific days, specific times, and specific durations. Miss your window, and you may wait days for another chance. In some units, showers are limited to a few minutes. In others, they are tied directly to behavior. Good conduct earns access. Infractions remove it. This transforms hygiene into leverage. A person who feels dirty, sweaty, or uncomfortable becomes more compliant. Discomfort lowers resistance. When cleanliness depends on obedience, rules are followed more closely, not because they are respected, but because the consequences are immediate and personal. In higher security settings, the control is even tighter. Showers may be escorted, water temperature may be regulated. Privacy is minimal or non-existent. In some cases, inmates must shower in restraints or under direct observation. The act of cleaning oneself becomes public, rushed, and stripped of dignity. This is not incidental. Privacy is a psychological boundary. When it is removed, people feel exposed, vulnerable, and powerless. Over time, that exposure reshapes self-perception. The body becomes something managed rather than owned. Clothing and laundry follow similar patterns. Inmates do not choose what they wear. Uniforms are issued, rotated, and replaced on schedules that prioritize inventory control over comfort or cleanliness. Laundry services are limited. Miss a laundry day, and clothes stay dirty, sometimes for weeks. Overcrowding worsens this. Shared machines, limited soap, long waits, lost items, disputes. Clothing becomes another stressor layered onto an already restrictive environment. Clean clothes become something to plan around, protect, and sometimes fight over. The psychological effect is subtle but cumulative. When a person cannot maintain basic cleanliness, shame increases. Self-esteem drops. Social withdrawal becomes common. People stop caring how they look, not because they don't value themselves, but because the effort feels pointless. This is where institutional thinking takes root. If nothing you do improves your condition, motivation fades. Bathrooms provide another layer of control. Access to toilets is regulated by movement schedules, lockdowns, and counts. In some units, inmates must ask permission to use the restroom. In others, toilets are located in shared spaces with no privacy barriers. This constant lack of privacy erodes boundaries. The body becomes public. Embarrassment becomes routine. Over time, people adapt by emotionally detaching from their own physical needs. What once felt invasive becomes normal, and that normalization is dangerous. Because dignity is not something the system has to actively remove, it disappears on its own when exposure is constant. Hygiene restrictions are often justified as necessary for safety. Limiting movement reduces risk. Supervision prevents contraband. Efficiency keeps operations running, but the cost is rarely discussed. When people are denied control over their own bodies, even in small ways, it reinforces helplessness. And helplessness is one of the strongest predictors of long-term institutionalization. Former inmates often describe hygiene control as one of the most humiliating aspects of incarceration, not because it was physically painful, but because it constantly reminded them of their lack of autonomy. You wait to clean yourself. You ask to relieve yourself. You accept discomfort as normal. Over time, expectations shrink. This also affects social dynamics inside prison. Cleanliness becomes status. Those with access to better hygiene, through work assignments, housing placement, or commissary, are perceived differently. Clean inmates are treated with more respect. Dirty inmates are avoided. This creates another hierarchy layered onto an already rigid system. And again, the institution benefits. When inmates judge and distance themselves from each other, collective resistance weakens. Division maintains order. Perhaps the most damaging aspect of hygiene control is how it follows people after release. Many former inmates report lingering discomfort with privacy. Long showers feel unfamiliar. Closed bathroom doors feel strange. The freedom to clean oneself without permission takes time to feel real. The body remembers control long after the bars are gone. Hygiene may seem minor compared to confinement or violence, but its impact is deep. It touches identity, dignity, and self-worth in quiet, persistent ways. And like food and sleep, it operates without spectacle. No headlines, no footage, no outrage, just daily erosion. In the next chapter, we will examine the final and most powerful tool in this system of control, silence, and how enforced quiet, restricted speech, and the fear of collective punishment shape behavior, identity, and survival behind bars. Silence in prison is never accidental. It is not simply the absence of noise, nor is it a natural byproduct of confinement. Silence inside prison is shaped, enforced, and maintained with precision, because controlling sound is one of the most effective ways to control people. On the outside, speech is instinctive. You speak when you are confused, angry, bored, or curious. Silence is a choice. It can mean peace, reflection, or respect. Inside prison, silence is strategic. In many facilities, silence is expected during count, movement, meals, and lockdowns. Talking at the wrong moment, even briefly, can result in discipline. Sometimes the punishment is individual. Often, it is collective. This is how silence becomes power. When one person speaks out of turn, an entire housing unit may lose privileges. Yard time disappears. Phones are shut off. Commissary access is suspended. Recreation is canceled. The message is immediate and unmistakable. Your voice affects everyone. And so, voices disappear. Inmates learn quickly that speaking is risky, not just for themselves, but for others. This creates an environment where silence is enforced not by guards, but by peers. One careless comment can spark anger from dozens of people desperate to avoid punishment. This peer-enforced silence is one of the most efficient control mechanisms in prison. Authority does not need to constantly intervene. The population regulates itself. Over time, this changes behavior in subtle ways. People stop asking questions. They stop challenging decisions. They stop expressing frustration. Even when something feels wrong, unfair, or dangerous, silence feels safer than speech. This is not submission. It is survival. Sound itself becomes threatening. Doors slamming signal movement. Keys jangling signal authority. Boots approaching signal inspection. Radios crackling signal orders. Every noise carries meaning. Inmates learn to interpret sound the way prey interprets movement. Silence, in contrast, becomes a warning. When a unit goes quiet suddenly, it often means tension. Something is wrong. A search is coming. A lockdown is imminent. Silence heightens anxiety rather than relieving it. In some housing units, inmates are required to remain silent for extended periods, sometimes hours at a time. Talking during these periods can result in write-ups or loss of privileges. Even whispering can be risky. This constant self-monitoring exhausts the mind. Speech is not just communication, it is release. When people cannot speak freely, emotions stay trapped. Anger has nowhere to go. Fear has no outlet. Grief remains internal. Over time, emotional expression shuts down. Former inmates often describe becoming quieter, flatter, less expressive, not because they wanted to, but because silence became habit. Speaking felt unnecessary. Sometimes it felt dangerous. This internal silence lingers long after release. Many struggle to express emotions openly. Conversations feel awkward. Silence feels normal, even comforting. The prison teaches people not just when to be quiet, but how to disappear socially. Silence also reshapes identity. When speech is restricted, individuality fades. Opinions go unspoken. Stories remain untold. Humor becomes rare. Language shrinks. People begin to think in shorter sentences, simpler ideas, fewer words. This mental compression makes resistance difficult. It is hard to organize without conversation. Hard to protest without speech. Hard to imagine alternatives without dialogue. Silence keeps people isolated even when they are physically surrounded by others. And again, the system benefits. Silence reduces conflict. Silence reduces coordination. Silence reduces visibility. In high-security and segregation units, silence becomes even more absolute. Human interaction is minimal. Communication is limited to commands and compliance. Some inmates go days or weeks without meaningful conversation. The psychological effects are severe. Humans are social creatures. Speech is how we process reality, affirm existence, and maintain sanity. When speech is restricted long-term, people experience disorientation, emotional numbness, and cognitive decline. Yet because silence looks calm from the outside, it is rarely questioned. Quiet units are considered successful. Silent populations are considered controlled. Order is mistaken for wellness. This is the final layer of time control. Food controls hunger. Sleep controls energy. Hygiene controls dignity. Silence controls thought. Together, they form a system that does not rely on constant force. It relies on routine, restriction, and psychological adaptation. By the time an inmate has fully adjusted, they are no longer fighting the system. They are moving within it, speaking less, expecting less, needing less. And that is the ultimate goal. Not punishment alone, but transformation. In the final part of this documentary, we will bring everything together. We will examine what happens when time itself has been taken from a person and what it means to regain it after release. Prison does not end when the gates open. For many people, it follows them quietly, long after the uniform is returned, long after the cell door stops closing, long after the schedule is no longer enforced. Because the most powerful thing prison takes is not freedom of movement. It is ownership of time. Inside, time is not something you use. It is something done to you. Every chapter of this documentary has shown how the system controls the most basic human functions, not through violence, but through routine. Food served before hunger. Sleep interrupted before rest. Hygiene reduced to permission. Silence enforced through fear of collective punishment. None of these things leave visible scars. Yet together, they reshape how a person thinks, feels, and exists. When time is controlled long enough, the mind adapts. People stop making plans. Stop expecting choice. Stop imagining alternatives. Life narrows to schedules and compliance. Survival replaces aspiration. And when release finally comes, freedom does not feel the way people expect. The outside world moves too fast. Choices feel overwhelming. Silence feels unnatural. Sleeping without interruption feels unsafe. Eating whenever you want feels unfamiliar. The body and mind have been trained to wait for orders, for permission, for structure. This is why many former inmates say prison never really lets go. Not because they want to return, but because time was taken from them in a way that cannot be fully restored. This documentary is not an argument for or against incarceration. It is not an excuse for crime. It is not a political statement. It is an examination of reality. Because understanding how control works is the first step toward understanding its consequences. And whether someone believes prison should punish, rehabilitate, or simply isolate, one truth remains. Systems shape people. Schedules shape behavior. Routines shape identity. Time shapes the mind. If we ignore that, we ignore the long-term cost, not just to inmates, but to families, communities, and society itself. So the question is not whether prison should be structured. The question is how much control is necessary and how much is damaging. And once time is taken away, how much of a person can truly be given back? Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.